Welcome back. In this particular segment, we are going to be looking at Chapter 1 of the Moynihan Report, and we're going to be looking at some of the things that are noteworthy about the way that he describes what he saw when researching the African American community. And so, as we get into the report, we're going to go into Chapter 1, and the title of Chapter 1 is the Negro American Revolution. And I have my notes to refer to here because there are some statements that are made in this report I've come to see, especially in Chapter 1, that are very, very noteworthy to begin this whole report, right? So now, let's get into it. Right away, the report makes the statement that the revolution, the Negro American Revolution, is probably the most important revolution during the post-war era. It goes on to mention that these particular events that are happening as a result of this revolution are comparable both to the American Revolution and to the abolitionist movement. It mentions a couple of other phases in history, but what we're starting to see is that in this particular report, the Negro American Revolution is looked at something that's very important and that's very influential in regards to the history of this particular nation. It goes on to mention that it holds forth the prospect that the American Republic, even though it was flawed in its beginning because from its very inception, Negro enslavement was something that was very, very entrenched in society from the very beginning. It mentions that at last they have an opportunity to redeem the full promise of the Declaration of Independence. So now let's pause for a minute and think about that. The Declaration of Independence is one that holds out the opportunity for all men who are created equal to have certain rights, right? And so what that particular paragraph is highlighting is that from the inception of the America that we know today, from the very inception, slavery has existed. And so there's a dark cloud around that period of American history because of the fact that slavery was so rampant. And so now there's an opportunity to rectify that particular dark part of history for America. And then it goes on to mention, it's speaking about the African American leadership and how it is that it has performed above board. And now what it's referring to there, you must remember that this is a report that was filed in 1965. And so the majority of the work that has been done by the African American community, the civil rights movement, if we are to be more specific, was done according to this report in very good taste. The way that things were handled. It even mentions there that it has profound international implications as well. So the things that were going on in America at that particular time, the changes that were being put into place in regards to African Americans, that was something that was beginning to be seen throughout the whole world. And then the report goes on to say that although Negro leadership, as mentioned there, has acted in the strictest of propriety. So as we mentioned, in good taste, it says that it is no less clear that the movement has profound international implications. So although here, individuals who were part of the civil rights movement, they acted as American citizens. Whatever it was that they did, whatever stand that they took, the methods that they used, those things are being reflected at the same time in other parts of the earth, right? So now, as we go on further, the tactics that are used or that were espoused during the civil rights movement, the nonviolent tactics, is it a coincidence that those same tactics were used by the Congress Party to get the Indian nation from under British rule? Or maybe it was a coincidence that at the very same time that these issues begin to come to the fore and gain ground and make progress, the same thing was happening in a lot of African countries. So as we said in the beginning, the things that are being done during this period of time in America have far-reaching international implications. And that's true because, as the study here mentions, as the Negro movement or the Civil Rights movement was catching fire, then also the same issues, the same things that were going on here as a response to prejudice and bigotry, those same things were going on in other countries. And those countries used the way that Americans, Negro Americans, presented their issues to government the same way. They emulated their particular pattern so that they could get the same results. But now it goes on to talk about how it is that even though this is a clear struggle against racism, that even the African American community was affected by racism, right? And the two examples that it gives first is the Black Muslim movement, the doctrines that are espoused there. And of course, we're familiar with the Black Muslim movement, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and now Minister Louis Farrakhan, all individuals who took the lead in that particular movement. But that movement, according to this report, is one that espoused total alienation from the white world, except for the power influence. Now, as far as the power influence is concerned, we know from history that one of the things that the Black Muslim movement was all about was allowing Black individuals, women, children, Black families to build for themselves something so that they would not have to come to the white power structure in order to obtain the things that they need. And so that's one thing, or one situation that this particular report refers to as racism. Now that's up to you whether or not you believe that or not, but that's what the report says. And then another thing that it mentions is that on the far left, the attraction of Chinese communism. And that's something that the report says can no longer be ignored. So those two are examples of racism, according to the report, that can be found within the African American community. So, as the report continues, it helps us to appreciate that it is clear that what happens in America, as we've already said, is taken as a sign of what can or what must happen in the world at large. So think about that. The African American community in America is struggling to obtain the same rights and the same dignity as other groups. And so upon seeing that this was the course that was being taken in America, then the methods that were used began to be seen all over the world, worldwide implications, as it mentions. So now, whether or not the civil rights movement, the whole movement, whether or not it's successful or whether or not it met with failure, would also have an impact on the rest of the world also. Because here, this revolution that we're speaking about, according to the report, is a desire to seek a peaceful assimilation among the other races that exist within the United States. So it's a peaceful way to gain the same rights and privileges that all the other groups have. And then the report brings out that a sterling example of what is meant by a peaceful assimilation among the other groups is the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King was given a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, of course, that prize was given to him for the work that he had done. And of course, we are familiar with the work that he did and the results of it. But the report makes it clear that this is an expression of hope for the future. Now, isn't that interesting? The prize was given to Dr. King for the work that he had done, but then also because of the fact that his work would have far reaching effects on into the future. And because of the fact that he chose to engage in these particular issues peacefully, then the results of his actions and what he chose to do and those around him would have an effect that would be beneficial. And so that is a recognition of things that Dr. King had achieved, but then it was also a recognition of things that would result from the things that he had achieved in the future. Okay? And so it ends this particular section, and I'll read it verbatim. It says, "It is no less clear that carrying this revolution forward to a successful conclusion is a first priority confronting the Great Society." So now, in conclusion, what have we learned from this particular section of Chapter 1, the Negro American Revolution? According to this report, we can see that the revolution itself was very, very important during its time. Very important. The stage had been set by means of the civil rights movement. There were individuals who were taking the lead, and they were trying to gain rights and privileges for their group in a way that was nonviolent. And because of the methods that they used, because of what they were espousing, then those same methods or similar methods were beginning to be seen in other areas all around the world. Because the whole thrust of the movement, as we mentioned, is to be able to say that the promise that was made by the Declaration of Independence was fulfilled for all of the groups of individuals who came to reside in America. And so, as the report mentioned, because of the gravity of the situation, then the result of the revolution in America, whether it failed or whether it was successful, would have a far-reaching effect on the rest of the world. And so we can see that that's part of the reason why a Nobel Peace Prize was given to Dr. King for his efforts in the past, helping to organize individuals in peaceful protests and nonviolent protests, but then also as a beacon of hope for the future. Because undoubtedly the efforts that he had put forth and the training that he had given to those who he came to be a leader over, that training, that thought process, that pattern, the methods that he used, because they were being adopted all over the world, then it would have far-reaching benefits into the future. And so now that's the first part of the first chapter. In our next video, we'll get into a new subheading. It's called The End of the Beginning. So please come back. We're going to take our time with this particular report. We're going to pick it apart because I think it's necessary for us to understand what is within it. And so I'm thankful that you were able to join me today, and I hope that the rest of the week goes well for you. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Be easy.